today I was watching videos on how to be a caregiver to the elderly, just to
Mhm.
try to like prepare for this conversation. So I'm
Mhm.
like, I know zero things. I know no things. Maritza's gonna have to tell me all the things.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely an industry that I feel like not people don't really know a lot about it, especially because I feel that people don't really gravitate towards the older generation. They kinda tend to gravitate away. They move towards it's more in vogue to tend to the young rather than the old.
I guess
So
so.
people don't really know too much about the I'm just assuming it's an assumption, but from my perception, people don't really know a lot about that industry. And I was actually talking to the daughter of a resident today, and she was telling me that. She told me that before her dad moved into where I work, she never interacted with this population. She just this is her first experience having dealing with her dad being in that a community like that and also being around people like older people.
Wow. And I
Mhm.
think maybe we're afraid. That's what I think. I think it's possible that age and actually an inevitable demise, I guess, is something that we think about with age a lot of times. Like, oh no, that's about
Yeah.
death, and I'm scared, and I don't want to think about that. So let's push it aside. Do you
Mhm.
think maybe that's part of it?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I think people really don't like talking about death or thinking about it, and that's a big thing to have to deal with working in that industry or dealing with people of that age is that I mean, it's coming for all of us, but you're going to deal with a lot of death and dealing with grieving families and grieving residents when you work in that industry for sure. And I think that's a really big deterrent for people, especially those who just don't want to think about their own mortality.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, we deal with it all the time.
that's crazy. Okay, well, I will ask you about that. I think there's a place I want to start off,
Hmm.
and I found a quote. Well, it was today. I do this thing where I do a bit of journaling in the morning, and in order to get myself to do a little bit of journaling in the morning, because I'm pretty bad at it, I tend to just do it for a couple days and then stop doing it. But I wanted
Hmm.
to do better at that this year, so I got a book of quotes that's 365 quotes. So I'm like, okay, there's a
Cool.
quote every day. I can look at the quote and I can break it down, decide what I like about it, what I don't like about it, how does it apply to me, and that might help me journal a little bit, right? So the one of the quotes that I saw today, I thought I could start this whole thing off with this long preamble just to say the quote is this. It's by Buckminster Fuller, which is a crazy name. I find is amazing. Buckminster. First name Buckminster.
That's old timey and it's appropriate.
Yeah, that's it. It says, the minute you choose to do what you really want to do, it's a different kind of life. And that's his quote. And even though we've talked about this on my show on Twitch, not everybody listening to this podcast knows your somewhat origin story towards going to this business and how you made a
Hmm.
shift in life towards it. And so I know you as, of course, like the streamer Mar Pizza on Twitch, but that's only one side of the dice, really.
Hmm.
You're Maritza, who works with the elderly, and would you mind telling us, or telling us? Well, tell me. We'll see about everyone else. Mind telling me how you came to find what you really wanted to do in life, how you came to this.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard the long-winded version of it, but I'll do a Cliff Notes version. But basically, the way that I got back into this industry is because of COVID and leaving a position where I was very unhappy with the work I was doing. But the first job I ever had when I was 16 years old was working in one of these communities. It was a back then we called them retirement homes. We don't really call them that anymore in the industry. It's senior living. There's different categories of senior living, like you have independent living, so those people who can take care of themselves, they go and they just like rent an apartment in a community where they're living with people of similar age and similar interests. Then you have assisted living, that's what I work in, so those are people who are mostly independent, but there's some who need more care than others, so we offer different types of assistance. And then there is memory care, and that is for people who are suffering with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, who have dementia. And then there's skilled nursing, and that is for people who's are bedridden, they can't get up, and they really need every one of their daily things has to be taken care of by a caregiver or a nurse. So like feeding, bathing, toileting, all that is taken care of by someone. It's 24/7. So there's different levels of care. So when I was 16, it was more of an independent living community, and I worked as a server in the dining room. And so that was the first time that I interacted with the elderly population in for a long period of time. Prior to that, my mom, even to this day, she's been a caregiver for like 30 years.
Oh.
And she's always worked with older people. So when I was even younger than 16, my mom on the weekends would take me and my sister to her place of work where I ended up working at later when I was old enough to work. And she would take me with her and just to meet everybody. It's like, oh, this is Betty and this is Joe and so and so. And I would just say hi, and I would get to interact with them. Um, so fast forward, when I started working full time as an adult, I ended up in an industry, actually in the movie theater business, where I worked in management. So I worked with customers. I was customer service. I worked my way up into corporate positions, but that sort of work made me super unhappy, and it was kind of a buildup over maybe like 15 years where I realized I wasn't happy with the work I was doing. I did not like working with the kids. Like having to deal with teenagers was so annoying. Having to deal with customers, working in a customer service position, I did not like having to do a corporate role and have to like be like a little, I don't know, I describe it as kind of like torture, being in a corporate position where everyone is confused, nobody knows what they're doing, but we all pretend that we do. It was awful.
Oh, wow.
And when COVID happened, I was working a position that was, it wasn't that stressful, but I think I was burnt out being in a customer service position. So our the obviously during COVID, the movie theater business was heavily impacted because you can't bring a bunch of people together in a closed off room during a pandemic. So the movie theater industry really suffered. That was kind of an opportunity for me to just say, hey, I'm just not coming back to this job when you guys eventually reopen. But then there was a 9-month period where I was like, what am I going to do now? Because I've been doing the same thing for 15 years. Um, I just, that's also when I started streaming, but I was like, okay, I can't make this a living. So what am I going to do now? Um, my boyfriend actually is the one who recommended me working back with the the elderly, working with old people. He's the one, like, he's like, hey, whenever you talk about it, you talk so fondly about it, why don't you look and see if there's any positions available, not necessarily in like serving, because I did food service when I was there. I worked in the kitchen, I was a cook, I was a dishwasher, and also with being a server. But obviously, like, I'm old now, my back can't handle it. So he's like, hey, look into, maybe you could do like activities. And I was like, okay. So he's actually the one who found me the job listing of where I ended up applying to and working as an activities assistant. And that's how this all started back again, like 20 years later. Now I'm back working with the elderly.
Wow. And I noticed that's a thing. I know we've been saying elderly and old people, but usually when you talk about it, you say the grandmas and grandpas, right?
Yeah.
Like how did that get started?
Well, it's a very simple reason is I can't mention their names on my stream, so because I talk about them a lot. It's a big part of my life, having to, like, my position now is resident programs coordinator. Actually, it was changed to resident engagement coordinator.
Oh, okay.
And so with what I do for my work being such a big part of my life, and also I stream in the mornings, I talk about them a lot. And I don't want to use their real names, so I just call them all the ladies are grandmas and all the fellas are grandpas.
Okay, that makes a lot of
Respectfully, of
sense.
course.
And so now, what type of responsibilities, activities do you have to do? Well, have to do that you do as your job goes forward. Like, what does that mean? What does that encompass?
Well, the every company has a different policy for how they're going to manage their activities, and they also they change depending on what type of building you're working in. So the activities for a memory care place are going to be different from um like an assisted living place where I work, because you want to, like a memory care, you want to engage their senses more, like smell, taste, feel. And people in independent living, they're just like us. So, teaching them something, giving them spiritual guidance, like if they're religious, we provide church services and things like that. So in my current role as resident engagement coordinator is to provide activities that keep the residents engaged, but the focus at my company is to give the residents the opportunity to meet new friends and to make connections so that they can enjoy friendship through the rest of their life. And there's a funny joke. Well, it's not a joke, but one of the residents one time, there was three of them sitting together, and I said, "Let me take a picture of you girls, friends for life." And one of the residents said, "At our age, it is for life."
Friends for
They're
7 years.
funny,
No,
right?
that's not nice. No.
But that's like one of the. This is I don't have the actual facts or statistics, but one of the major issues in the industry of elder care and just the elderly in general is that there's a high percentage of depression and loneliness, because a lot of times you see people moving into these communities alone after a spouse has passed away, or maybe they both come in together, then one passes away, and like, so they come in, they're not necessarily happy to be moving into a community like this, because they come in after having lived in their house for 50 years and now they're moving into like a tiny one bedroom apartment. So it does cause a lot of sadness, loneliness. So one of my jobs is to provide a space for them to come together with other people who have similar interests, and to make new friends and stay engaged so that they can hopefully find something that brings them joy in the middle of something that may not be so joyful for them.
Wow, that's great, because I that's a question that I had was what is the goal of a place like this, of a residency like this? And I guess that's got to be one of the main goals,
Mm-hmm.
is to just keep
Yeah.
people engaged with life. How that is something I guess we just don't, I can probably don't want to think about that much either, because there's not everybody who's with somebody for 50 years or something. The two of you don't necessarily pass away at the exact same second.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's 10 years difference or something. And what do you do with those 10 years? I guess, I mean, what's the transition like? I guess is what I'm thinking. Someone shows up, they're not feeling, so hot about life in this particular new circumstance. How does someone go from that place to they're engaged with the community that's there, and they're doing things they're maybe doing much better? Like what are some of the steps towards that, I guess?
I think part of it is really, it starts with, I guess it would start with me and then the team that is bringing the person in, to show them that it's not so bad here. Like, hey, I know that it's a super downgrade, but let me show you what you can do here and all the amazing things that we have. We have an awesome chef who's been with us for 25 years, and his menu is like so delicious. So that's one aspect. Or hey, do you like knitting and crocheting? We have a what I call the yarn club, and you can come and like talk to other people who also like to knit or crochet. But also, so that's part of it. The other part is getting residents involved in being actively engaging new people. So we actually do have like we call them the resident ambassadors, and it's like I think we have 6 right now. So they're members of the community who are really upbeat. They are very social, and they always will go out of their way to see like, oh, that person's new, I've never met them, let me go say hi and let me get to know them, and then let's see if we can match them up with someone who already lives here, to try to give them a good experience coming into the community.
Wow.
The last part I'd say is It really also depends on the person. If you have a personality, like if you have a resident who's just so, like the attitude is so negative and they're just so unhappy, it's going to be a lot harder for them to find joy in a place like that. But there's also people who come in and right off the bat, they're just like, yes, this is for me. I love all these people and I'm going to engage and I'm going to do this and this and that. So, like, it's kind of like, it depends on the person. But where I work, we really try to get them out of their shell. And one of the awesome things about the community I work at is that a lot of the residents who are there are so nice and they're so welcoming. So it really makes my job so much easier because of them. And they're kind of like building a community. They're taking the initiative to be like, hey, come hang out with me, come sit with me, come play this game with me. And it makes it really easy. But of course, there are people who are going to have a way harder time. There was one resident, this was last year, I would say like in the summertime. I saw her. She had just moved in. I went to see her and I said, "Hey, how are you, Maritza? Nice to meet you." And she looks at me and she says, "I'm not gonna stay here. I'm leaving." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And like we hear stuff like that all the time when they're not happy. But just by talking to her more and getting to know her, her attitude about it like flipped, like 180. She's so happy every time I see her. She's like, thank you so much for keeping us safe and thank you for being here and for everything that you do for us. And she tells, last night actually, she said, tell your mama that she did a good job by bringing you into this world. And I was like,
Oh,
oh my
wow.
god.
What a compliment. The best compliment.
She's so sweet. So
Why do
it
you
really depends on the person.
why do you think it switched for her, like from such a negative place to such a positive place? Or like, I don't know if there's a process that you can remember, but what are the things that changed it?
Honestly, I think it was just her. I think her perception of what it was going to be like was so negative that when she actually arrived and she saw that it wasn't at all what she expected, it switched in her mind like, oh, this is actually not that bad. Like, people here are actually really nice. And it was just the staff that works there, the people that live there. She got to see us for who we are and she liked it. And we're all really nice. So there's no
Hmm.
reason to not like it.
I guess there is a stigma, probably, like we think of a home, you know what I mean? Like I've seen movies and usually it's in like comedy movies or awful depressing movies or something that's a media based thing, that's basically showing how awful it is to be in a residence place. It's usually the side that's being seen. So do you think maybe that's a starting point that's bothering people? And then how, I'm wondering, how is it different in reality? Like what's the reality? You're obviously trying to do really well. Your goal is the opposite of what we would be seeing in some of these movies and TV shows. So yeah.
Oh yeah. So I think that yeah, media has definitely it has put in people's minds that we're living at a place like that is really bad. It definitely has negative there's negative stigma to it when you call a place a home. So we don't call it a home. Oh, well, here's the thing. Like it is someone's home, right? We
Sure.
want them to be happy to be in their new home, but we use words like community and senior living, and the language of this industry has definitely changed from when I first started and I was 16. We called it a retirement home. Now it's called a retirement community or senior living. So it makes it feel like you aren't stuck in a place. And definitely when you think of retirement home, you have this idea of like people just sitting in the wheelchair, like they're in a hallway, just kind of sitting there doing nothing, and it's dirty and smells. And I mean, I'm sure there's places that are like that, but uh, the industry as a whole is really moving away from that, or they're trying to get away from people thinking that that's the way it is because it's not. But like I said, for some places probably, but for my experience in the communities I've been in, they've all been really great. They're really focusing on making this a good experience for the people that live there. Um, so it just, yeah, it just depends.
It just
I
depends.
hope that in the future that the media can show this type of industry in a different way.
Yeah.
because obviously people don't like to really talk about elder care and elderly living, senior living.
Yeah.
But whenever you hear anything about these types of communities, it's always bad, right? Like neglect or abuse. And unfortunately, that does happen in the industry, of course. But hopefully, places are hiring people who are just going to be kind and compassionate. Those are the people you need for this type of industry. People who care, people who have a lot of patience, and who are just going to, help make that place a better place for those people that live there.
Okay. So, speaking that makes a lot of sense, and obviously, I know that changing language can be helpful, right? I assume that makes things less. If there's a word, if there's a series of words that's going to scare people to death, like as soon as we hear home, we get scared. But if you say, okay, this is a senior, senior community, a senior living community, that changes the vibe, and hopefully the way you approach the entire thing is different. Is what it sounds like to me.
Hmm.
So that's pretty interesting. So I'm wondering, speaking of that, and like, of course, there's always going to be exceptions to that, but I bet for the most part, people want to take care of the people who have gotten older, and they're not gone; they're still here. So I think it's important that there's people who are compassionate like you, making this happen. Um, what's something that's really surprising that we may not know, that people generally may not know about the world of the elderly or senior living communities?
I think the thing that people don't really realize, and this is going to sound weird maybe, but I think about this a lot because when I'm at work talking to the residents, I'm just talking to people like you or me, like we're just people. They're also just people. And I feel like some people don't treat them like people sometimes. They're just like, there's something in the industry, it's called elder speak, where we talk down to the elderly because we assume that they don't understand us. It's such a weird thing that happens that we actually get trained on it, on how not to use elder speak, like, talking really loud or like saying, "Hey, sweetie," or stuff like that.
Oh,
Um,
I'd love to hear more
or
about
like,
that too. Like, what do we not do? Because I feel like that's the same as if you were talking to kids in a way. I always thought it was annoying when adults would talk kind of down to you, or in a real high voice, or this kind of
yeah,
thing.
it's
And it seems
it's
that's sort of like doing
similar,
that to somebody, but they're like 30 years older than you. Like they
right?
technically should be talking to you like that.
Like, imagine talking to a World War II vet and just like, "Hey, honey, sweetie, like, are you okay? Do you need help?" Like, you don't talk to a normal person. Like, like it's just, they're just people, maybe, they're older. And maybe some of them are hard of hearing, but you have to just talk to them like a normal person and just get to know them. And they all have really amazing stories to tell. And speaking of World War II veterans, we don't have very many of those left.
No, that was a while
Because
ago.
I mean, World War II was a long time ago. So I think that there's, maybe it's just my own perception of it, but I feel that sometimes when you say, "Oh, look at that old man, he's so cute with the way he's walking and the way he's talking and dressing," I'm like, he's just a man. Like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes people don't almost think, they don't think of them as like real people.
I
Like,
think you're
yeah,
right.
they're with like feelings and emotions, and like, no, they're not cute. That grandpa is not cute. He's just a man.
He's just some guy. Okay.
He's just a guy.
His pants
But
are
that's
high up, but he's just a guy.
yeah, he's just living his life. And maybe, like, you're right, it's the same thing with kids. Some people don't treat kids like, or sorry, like they talk down to them, and it happens also, I think, with the elderly sometimes. So just treat them, they're just normal.
They're just normal. So that's like actually the most surprising thing. And it's funny that it's funny that you say that, because I'm sort of seeing it myself. Like, I'm not going to exclude myself from it. Like, I want to talk to you about this because I think I have all the same prejudices as anybody else in this room, because I think I've tried to not think about being old. Like, there's just no way I could possibly be an old person at some point. Like, there's no way. But I've gotten older every year. So ultimately, no, it's going to happen. And that's the way I'm going to be at some point. I can do my best to try to be healthy. I can do my best to eat clean or whatever I want to do. But at some point, I'm going to be in this circumstance. And it's true. It's like we're saying, this is the elderly. This is some other category of person that isn't really a person, I guess. They're just like elderly or something. But I mean, I wonder, how do we get out of this? Yeah, like a concept. And so it's almost like a segmentation in our minds of like, here's people and here's elderly, which is, I noticed that when I was watching, like I said, to do this interview, I started watching videos about elder care. And I noticed one of the first things the person was saying was, if you're taking care of an older person, they didn't say elderly. They didn't say all these other things. And I do like that you say grandmas and grandpas, actually, because that puts them into a place that's actually, everybody loves their grandmas and grandpas for the most part, unless they're really mean or something. But
yeah,
but
some of them are mean, but they have a good heart. You just have to get to know them.
Sometimes. So like, but that's it. That does put them in like a familial category, I think, rather than just some elderly category, which is just one block thing that doesn't exist in your world, but it's a thing that has to be dealt with over here or something. So I think that's...
Well, can I tell you something that's going to blow your mind?
You can tell me lots of things that blow my mind, please.
Okay, so people, like you said, that it's a different category, right? Like it's us and them. And when you said, oh, well, one day I'm going to be old too. Well, as a young person, a younger person, youngish person, you think of aging and you think one day I'm going to be old, and you are kind of afraid of being old. You're afraid to be 90 years old because you're so young right now. You can't even think of being 90. Well, guess what? Age doesn't happen like that. You slowly, over the decades, get to 90. So you're not even going to notice it until one day you wake up and you're 90 years old. Because when you were a kid, nothing hurt. You turn 20, little things start to hurt, but you deal with it. You turn 30, something else starts to hurt, but you deal with it. You turn 40, and it just adds up, but slowly over time, so slowly that one day you're going to wake up, you're going to be 90, and you're not even going to, you're like, what the heck? So that's I think when people think of aging, they think I'm this age now, I cannot even be 90, but they think it happens like that, like one day everything's gonna hurt. No, it happens slowly over time.
You might have a chance to get used to it, though. That actually makes me feel a little better,
Yeah.
to be honest.
So by the time that you are 90 years old, you have been 50, 60, 70, 80. By the time you get to 90, like, you're chilling. It's no big deal. You made it this far. So when you think of it that way, rather than I'm 30 now, I'm going to be 90 tomorrow, like, it's just a gradual process that by the time you get there, you're just going to be like, you're going to be having a good time.
I think you're right. And I just thought about it too. If you asked me to go back to being 17 years old or something right now, but and losing everything that I know about life and the experiences that I've had, and I'm 17 again. I don't think 17 is better than my age. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think so at all. So I'm sure physically it's nicer to be not 90, because a 9-year-old by, like you say, the pains just sort of be like, okay, I got used to the pain over time. But those pains, that notwithstanding, at least, and of course, if you're not in a dementia situation or something like that, the experiences of like 55 more years or something like that added to your life, and being able to say, like, you just saw so many things. It's probably so many small details of life, the mundane details of life, having seen them so many times. There must be something to that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And think of when you were 17 and how you were like, oh my God, I am so afraid to be whatever age you are now, when you were 17.
Yeah.
But when you're here now, it's not that bad. It's actually pretty good.
So true.
So you never know what it's going to be like. And that's one of the things, there's so many people out there who are afraid of getting old. They think it's like, oh, I'm going to be 50 and it's the game over, man. When people who are 50 are living such full, rich lives. Even people who are I think the average age where I work, I'm guesstimating is about 75, 80. And those people are active. Like they
Nice.
are, there's a grandma, I don't want to say grandma, but there's a resident who,
Oh, but grandma's
she
is nice.
goes,
I know you mean it in a sweet way.
oh yeah, like I love them so much. But she goes for a hike every other day. Like she's walking up and down and being super active. She goes and plays bridge with her friends. She goes to the movies. She goes like for walks and all this and that. Like she's so active. She's in her 80s. So like you said, you still have so much life to live. And well, as a young person, when you think about the future, people are so afraid of getting old. And I'm like, hey, maybe it's not just about getting old, but also like how people fear death. It's like
Yeah.
you're 30 now, you probably have like 60 years left. So just like enjoy it and don't think about it and enjoy the now. But it's I've learned a lot working in this industry, the elderly care communities. And I think the best thing that I've learned is just to enjoy the now and not think of the future. The future is going to be fine. And in terms of like age, it's going to be okay. We're all just going to slowly get to where we're going and everything's going to be okay. As long as it's like, if you keep yourself active or whatever you want to do with your life, as long as you're happy, it doesn't matter what age you are. You can do whatever you want.
Wow. So speaking of that, since we're all going to get there, I'm curious with the knowledge that you now have since you work in this industry and you've been around it for actually such a long part of your life, and you find yourself 75, 80 years old, and you're in one of these situations. You're now in one of these situations. There's a Maritza 2.0 helping helping you out. What are some of
Mhm.
the things you're going to be able to take from your experience in this in life, and how are you going to approach this situation?
I've learned one of the things I always tell the residents is if you don't use it, you lose it. So I think one of the biggest takeaways is a lot of people getting older have a lot of mobility issues because they stop moving. And it I tell them, hey, let's go exercise, let's go move our limbs, just like stretching it out, because if you don't use it, you lose it, unfortunately. And as the body ages, circulation isn't the best, so if you're not moving around, it all kind of just settles.
Huh.
So that's one of the really big things that I think about a lot when I'm there. It's like, okay, I got to get moving. It's helped me to not be so sedentary, even though my job is very physically demanding. I just think about it. I'm like, I leave work and I come home and I'm just sitting here and I'm like, maybe I should get up and do something.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to not take the little things for granted, things that you don't even think about, like not being able to stand is a big thing, not being able to reach for things is a big thing. Like if you can't move and you have something over here just out of arm's length, you can't get it, so it's really important to move it or you're gonna lose it.
That makes a
So
lot of
when
sense.
I'm in 110 and living in one of these communities, I'm just gonna try to be as happy as I can be. That's all. That's all anybody really should be focusing on. Just be happy.
Really, it sounds like a mentality that you're aiming at. And I just thought of something since you're talking about the movement aspect of things. I spent a bunch of time today. I got I had got a desk that adjusts in height and that kind of stuff. So while I was making questions for some of the people for this podcast, and while I was going over your questions, I was walking on a treadmill because I
Mm,
started to realize that they're talking about doing a lot of walking over the 30 or 40 years of time before this time period helps you to stay alive longer because of actual just having the muscles in your body be stronger, and used to moving more often. And I was going to ask you about this because a lot of times people pass away because they fell. How
yes.
big a deal is falling? We see this all the time. There's been commercials for like 40 years about things to help older people if they fall down. So I believe that falling is the most dangerous thing in the whole world.
It
I'm going to
is.
ask you, is it really is? So this is legit.
Yeah. It's 100% legit. Falling, let's say, like I said, I don't have the statistics or the data on this, but falling is one of the biggest risk factors for older people because of it's so easy to break a hip or break like a really important bone in your body. Hips mostly because that's usually where you're going to land. Or if it's like a backwards fall, you could fall and hit your head really bad. And when you do that as somebody who's older, you can't like it's harder to recover. And it could lead to infection. It could lead to like all these other health problems. So this is something that I noticed, and me and somebody else were talking about it. I think it was one of the grandmas actually. Well, somebody said, "Have you noticed that there's just like so many walkers now, more than there used to be?" And I thought about it, and she's 100% correct because when I was 16 back in the day and I was working as a server, I think there was one person in the whole community. We're talking about like 80 plus residents who had a walker. There may be one person with a cane and one person on a scooter. Everyone else was walking just without an aid. But I think as over the years, because falls are one of the biggest risk factors for like injury and death, that doctors are now giving residents walkers who even have like a hint of the possibility of falling, so to just like completely stop it, just there's no chance of you falling if you have your walker. So now the percentage of people who have walkers versus don't flip. So now you see like everyone has a walker and maybe one or two people are still walking without the aid of anything. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things. That's why we focus when we do our exercise. So we have to do exercise every day. And one of the things we focus on is leg strength and ankle strength.
Nice.
Those are the biggest, most important parts of walking, especially your ankles, to be able to move the foot in, in such a way where you're not going to accidentally trip over your own foot. And we need to keep those muscles strong to keep people walking longer, and staying balanced.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. So that makes me happy. I'm just taking the notes on this stuff. I'm like, what can I do right now? When am I adding my
Walking
workout
on the
now?
treadmill is good. It's good.
I do the
Walk on the
treadmill.
treadmill. You can even while you're sitting right now. All of our exercises are sitting exercises. We never
Oh,
stand up just because we don't even want to risk a fall.
if you make the fall,
So,
it's defeating the
yeah,
purpose. Yeah.
exactly. So we sit, and one stretch that we do is like we'll go up on our tippy toes while we're sitting and then bring them down. And that's going to strengthen your calf muscles, right? And that's going to keep you strong. Are you doing it right now?
No,
I'm
I
doing
am.
it.
I am doing it, and that's what they call that the soleus push up. I think at this point, or a soleus stretch, because it's
I'm not sure.
the flat the flat calf muscle behind those beefy calf
Uh-huh.
muscles that tends to be a
Yeah.
slow twitch muscle that helps you to walk. So I
Yep.
learned about this not long ago, actually, that
There you go.
people who,
You
even
can
if they're
also
sorry, keep going.
No, you go,
No,
you
no,
go.
I would say people who
No,
sit in
you.
their know me. People who sit in their desks and do soleus exercises, or just calf raises, essentially seated calf raise. Um, Apparently, they burn like way more calories as well. Like even if you're just a person, if you're just doing this all day, lifting your toes and stuff, it apparently gives you like brings your blood pressure down, your heart disease factors down, and all this kind of stuff. So that sounds like an amazing exercise that people should be doing. So I think you're nailing it.
It is. Everyone should do it. You can also do ankle. I don't know what the name of the exercises, but like if you stretch your leg out and point your toes and then point your toes back towards you, you really stretch the back of your leg. We do those exercises. We just do a lot of little things that helps them keep them strong.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I wonder about this. Are there, since it's residents, they're people like anybody else. Are there ever like conflicts that you have to resolve? Now, not to
Oh
make it
yeah.
too dramatic, but I'm curious. Are there ever conflicts?
Basically, it's like a high school in terms of drama. There's always drama. We're always spilling the tea. But yeah, there's I'll give you an example. The situation that recently happened is that we have a resident who talks a lot. And she talks a lot.
Oh,
And she always has a story to tell. And she's super sweet and I always listen to her stories, but It's she's the type of person who's gonna keep talking and kind of trap you, you know. And so one story will just bleed into the other, and it's just a constant stream of consciousness. But we had a couple of people complain about her because she also talks over people. So I will be leading a class about something, and she's like, you know, back when I was 16 years old, I met my husband and blah, 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 you know, like nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I have to just be like, hey, well, you can tell me the story later and we'll talk about it after the class. But the other people in the class, they came up to me after and they said, hey, we can't be in that class if she's going to be in there because she's so rude. And they're kind of mean to her too. And so it's kind of like I have to say, okay, please, you know, don't be super mean to her. I will talk to her and then I have to tell her, hey, when we're in class, can you just please, you know, if you want to talk to me after we can, but keep, you know, let's keep it going, focus on what we're doing. And so it's like it's hard because they all one of the things that you develop as you get older is that you stop giving a crap about anybody else. Anybody else but you. So you're gonna do what you want to do, and you don't care because what's funny is the people who are complaining about her do the same thing. So it's like it's a balancing act for sure. But I just try to tell them, I said, hey, let's just all be respectful of each other. Let's all remember that we're not all the same, but just be kind and, you know, don't be mean. I actually told someone the other, was it yesterday? About the same lady, but in a different situation. He said, sometimes I wish I could just shut her mouth up or something like that. And I looked at him and I said, that's not nice. You shouldn't say things like that. And he's like, I know.
Yeah, I know. I
So
know.
yeah, there's so much drama, like you wouldn't believe it. It's like a high school, but you know,
I guess
keeps it
that
interesting.
makes sense though, because not everybody, it's not like it's not like each person curated this group of people that they're now with, right? Like
Mhm.
it's random people. Um Speaking of that definitely brings me to something I was curious about, the woman talking. I have noticed sometimes that, you know, older people that I've known in my life tend to repeat stories. So does that happen a lot? Like, do you what type of stuff do you find older people are repeating? Is it just any story, but or are there specific kinds of things people are repeating that they say?
It really depends on the person. They will repeat a story that they've told me a million times or everybody a million times. It's not anything specific. It's just whatever kind of triggers that memory. So, for example, anytime we do something, it's like mind exercises is to keep our brain sharp,
Oh.
and we'll do like history. We'll say, okay, I'm going to do history trivia, and every time I say the word history, the same resident will tell me the same story about how she said, oh, I love history, and my daughter told me that history must have been easy for me when I was young because there wasn't so much of it. So she tells me that story all the time. But honestly, I think it's something, and I've noticed it in myself. And I'm not like that old, but I if someone says something to me, it'll trigger like the same memory for the same story. So I maybe it's like some human nature, human behavior that you just have these funny little anecdotes that you build up throughout your whole life. And then at the end, or not at the end, but like later on in life,
Later on in life,
uh,
or
when
near the end.
it triggers this, yeah, it triggers the same memory. So yeah, I hear the same stories all the time. It does, but not with everybody though. There's some people who are more, I guess, like I don't know, cognitively aware that they are saying the same story, and they'll be like, "Oh, I've told you this before," and
Mm,
I'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's fine, but I'll still listen to it," you know. And so some people don't ever tell me any stories, but some people always tell me the same story. So it just depends on the person.
okay.
I'm sure there's some research papers and doctors out there who've looked into this. But of course, with people who have Alzheimer's and who develop dementia, they're the people who are going to keep telling you like the same thing over and over. And that's like a whole other
It's a different ball game.
thing. Yeah, dementia care is an industry that is very intense. So that's where I was before where I am now. I learned a lot working there.
Really?
Yeah, it's completely different.
That feels like it would be
So different.
difficult because people who can't remember things it can sometimes be funny, but also sometimes be like really rough. I could see somebody being very confused or angry or not know, like, you know, if I put myself in that situation, I could see times where I might be angry about something, or like easily put just being that confused might make for a dangerous situation or something like that, you know.
Yeah. And working in memory care. So memory care is all just Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and anybody who suffers from dementia. So if they have like an the thing about Alzheimer's too is you can't get diagnosed with Alzheimer's really until after you've died, because then they can look at your brain and tell you, oh yeah, they did have Alzheimer's. But we can pretty much see it in people who have the symptoms of the disease, or like, okay, well that's probably what it is. And dementia is a symptom of Alzheimer's and or Parkinson's. So dementia isn't a diagnosis per se, it's not a disease, it's a symptom of the disease of Alzheimer's. So people can have what's called MCI, so mild cognitive impairment, and that's kind of like early signs of maybe some sort of dementia causing disease. But when somebody is advanced to the point where they don't know who you are, or they're causing harm to themselves or others, then you put them in a memory care community where it's under lock and key, they can't leave. It's a smaller community, and that's a whole different industry that's just so intense. And for anybody who has family members who have Alzheimer's or that some like Parkinson's, it's a devastating disease, and it's like probably one of the hardest jobs you could do. And it's really intense. So for me, um I guess I have the kind of people ask me all the time is like, how can you work in a place like that? Not to be rude, but
It's difficult.
because like it's difficult. You deal with a lot of death, you deal with the decline of people that you're with every single day. It's tough, but I think it's my personality is like I kind of like turn off that part of, not in a rude way, but kind of like the caring part where like I just know this is my job and I have a job to do, and I'm going to do that job to the best of my ability, and letting my emotions kind of take over. If I let that happen and like I'm sad or crying, then I can't do my job, you know? And so people will say to me, well, how do you deal with it? Well, I just do what I got to do.
I
Maybe
just do
it's
what I
something I
gotta do.
inherited. Yeah, it's something, maybe my mom's been a caregiver for, like 30 plus years, and I am definitely almost like I'm like her mini me. I have the same temperament. I have the same like caring nature. Well, she's probably more caring than me, but it's just something that she gifted me with, this ability to really like put them before my emotions, I
I see.
guess.
It's a kind of, in a way, detachment. I was gonna
Hmm.
ask you that question specifically. Of course, I was gonna say, how do you deal with death? Because you're talking to these people every day. You're doing things with these people every day. You know them, fairly intimately of what's going on with their lives. And you're doing your best to have them have the best life that there is. And I'm assuming it's pretty clear, though. It's a clear thing that sooner or later, we're human beings. We don't live forever. This is a thing that's going to happen. I did want to ask you, how do you specifically deal with it? I mean, obviously when you're on the job, it sounds like you do a thing that they call detachment, which is like you step back, you take a breath, and you look at things objectively, and you're able to go forward, which is an incredible superpower. A lot of people can't be objective about much, and so being objective about difficult things like that is pretty amazing. So clap 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 for you. But
Thanks.
ultimately though, like, and how, I do still kind of wonder, how do you process that? Or do you feel like it's something that builds up, or you're able to let go of, like, I mean, this is a natural circumstance. I think a lot of us just don't deal with death that often. I don't deal with it every single
Hmm.
day. It's a couple of people I know have passed away, but other than that, it's not something where the whole community that I'm around are people that are not very many years away from passing away. So it must happen on a regular basis. What's some of your advice that you could give for dealing with that situation?
Well, you brought up kind of a good point, is that you are around people who aren't nearing that point in their life. And I think maybe that's why, if someone dies who's very young, it's very shocking and it's almost unbelievable. But when you're working with people who are nearing the end of their life, maybe that has something to do with it. Where, well, for me personally, it doesn't feel as shocking to me. Of course, it is still a little bit of a shock when you're like, oh wow, I was just talking to this person yesterday, and then you go into work the next day and they've passed away. So it I think it depends on the person, because, and this is actually an internal struggle maybe that I've thought about this, is like, why don't I cry? Why
Oh.
don't I cry more? Like, I sometimes feel like a monster because I'm like, well, I talked to this person, they're gone. I don't feel sad, but I mean, I do feel sad, but like at the same time, I'm just like, okay, we're just gonna keep moving. And I don't know if it's just like a coping mechanism that I've developed, but I think it does depend on the person. There are, well, let me tell you a story.
Sure, yeah, let's do it through a
uh,
story.
so I think this is probably one of the reasons why, is because when I was 16, 17, when I was working at the retirement community when I was a teenager, I was really good friends with a resident that lived there. Her name was Florine, and
Wow.
she was super tall and super regal looking, and she was just so beautiful. And she walked with a cane. And this was around the time of Harry Potter. So
Ooh.
she was an avid reader. And I really wanted to read Harry Potter. And my mom, for some reason, wouldn't let me. So I said, Florine, can you please talk to my mom and tell her to let me read Harry Potter, please? And so me and Florine, we were just like super good friends. Like, she was my work bestie, basically, even though she lived there. But she was an artist. She was a talented drawer. She loved art. She was like, into tarot card reading. She was like super cool. Um, so she finally did convince my mom to let me read Harry Potter. It was Harry Potter's 1, 2, and 3, I think. The fourth one maybe had just come out. And me and Florine made plans. We're like, okay, when the Harry Potter movie comes out, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, me and you are going to go watch it. And she's like, yes, we're going to go watch it. And I was like, cool. And then one day I was at home. My mom calls me and she says, hey, just so you know, Florine passed away. And I was like, such a shock to me, because I think that was like one of the first times that I had to deal with like death, kind of. Uh, and I think I told myself back then that I was never going to get close to a resident like that ever again.
Oh.
And I was like, because I don't want to like deal with having to build like this bond. And especially because it's that industry, you're going to lose all the people that you build bonds with, basically. So I think maybe that was for me the point where I put like a little stopper on my little heart. And I said, okay, we're just gonna, it's the job and it is what it is. And maybe that's one of the reasons why, but I do feel sad, of course. It's just, I don't get as sad as other people I'm around. So people are like bawling and just like so distraught. And I'm also unfortunately a type of person who doesn't know how to comfort other people when they're crying.
Oh,
So
really?
that's an issue. So that's an
Like,
issue.
yeah, buck up,
Like,
champ.
oh, yeah, it'll be all right. I'll see you at exercise, all right?
just, just clean
But
yourself
yeah,
up.
it definitely takes like a type of personality. Well, we have done, or I have been at like celebrations of life for residents,
Hmm.
where when the family of the resident starts crying, then I get sad because
Hmm.
I'm just like, oh man,
That
but
that makes sense though. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it does make sense. I think that it is true that you've got a context for this. It's not like you're some sort of psychopath,
right.
like right.
I hope I'm
It
not, because I
doesn't.
think about it sometimes.
No, but there's a context for this. It's true. Going in, you're dealing with people who are older, and there's only so many years left, and that's how it's going to go. You've dealt with this since you were a child. Like that makes a lot of sense that you would be saying, okay, I'll put myself where I need to be in order to do the job. And then, yeah, celebration of life, it's an appropriate place to let your feelings out and process them that way. So I do like
Mhm.
this. I'm going to be honest with you. I do like that you are kind of saying we don't just have to let our emotions be spouting off in all directions like some sort of like wild fire hose, just because the situation is very sad, and also you don't have to keep it bottled up forever either, right? Like you do have
Mhm.
appropriate times where you're like, yeah, okay, I feel sad about this. I don't know. Am I on track here at all?
No, you're right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like going back to just the individuals. Some people deal with it in one way. Everybody has their own ways of coping with it. And I think for the most part, all of us who work in this industry are we know that this is just part of the job. That one day you can come in and, resident you talk to every day is all of a sudden they're gone. And I think maybe one thing that helps too with us dealing with that is that we don't really see anything outside of them never coming back. We don't go to the funeral. We can if we want to. The families will invite us to funerals, or like wakes and stuff. But we're like one day they're here, one day they're not. So uh of course, depending, because you build relationships with the families over however much time the resident spends at the community. So it's based on the relationship, but I think that's one of the reasons why, like, if you're just a server in the dining room and you see the resident every day and one day they just don't come back, it doesn't hit you as hard. So I think
I
that's
see.
another reason
It's an
why
interesting
maybe
circumstance. Like a
yeah, it's
specific
like,
circumstance. They're just not here. Almost like if you worked at a restaurant and somebody came in every day, but then they stopped coming. In a sense, you'd be
yeah.
like, I wonder where they went. In a way.
Yeah,
You wouldn't be
and
like,
then you're like, "Okay," and then the next resident comes in and fills in their spot, and then you just keep going.
that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm happy that you're kind of giving me this perspective because I really wouldn't know this, and I'm sure a lot of people would like it, and um I'm curious about a couple of more things. Do you mind if I
Mhm,
ask you a couple more things? I
of
am
course.
I'm in your experience, what are older people at this stage of life and in this circumstance that where they're in a community, what are they doing with their time? And I mean, like, what do they care about most? Essentially, like, I know it's different for each person, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
are there any similarities? Are you seeing any pattern there at all that's like, hey, they older people seem to care about these few things or something like that? What's your thoughts?
They really care about bingo. Um, well, one of the reasons why my title changed from programs coordinator to engagement coordinator is because in our company, and I think in the industry as a whole, we're moving away from that like mass group activity and moving more towards giving residents a sense of purpose outside of like, okay, at 1 o'clock we have bingo, at 2 o'clock we have bridge, at 3 o'clock we have this, because those are just things for them to do, but it doesn't really fulfill their life unless you're a hardcore bingo person, and that's all you. But we're trying to get them to move away from like the program mass activity model that I think the industry as a whole was following, and now we're moving more towards giving them more purpose in their life. So it really depends on the person. Uh but they do love bingo. Like, I the first thing they told me when I started my job, literally I was being interviewed, the executive director said to me, she looked at me right in the eyes and she said, "Do not mess with bingo." I was like, "Oh my god." Okay. But I think it really does depend on the individual. So our community is assisted living. So everybody's independent. They can do whatever they want as long as, like, it's doesn't cause them any harm. They can choose to watch TV all day if that's what they like. They can choose to never come downstairs and be in their apartment all the time. They can choose to go to art class but then not go to exercise, or vice versa. Like, it's their choice to do whatever they want to do. Some people who have no family, some of them never come out of their apartments. Other people who have no family will always be downstairs. Or some people like just are constantly outside of the community and they only come back to sleep. Like, it really just depends on the person. So it varies. And in my community, everybody is so completely like, They're all so different. So it's not all the same. I think it really, if you go to like a skilled nursing, so skilled nursing I've never worked in, you it's kind of, it's a medical facility, so that's where you, it's kind of like maybe where the concept of when you think of a retirement home, it might be skilled nursing that people think of, where those people are forced to do all these things because it's things to do, not because necessarily because it's something they want to do. It's just like, we're gonna keep you moving because we feel like that's right. So that's a different industry. I've never worked there, but yeah, our community, everybody just kind of does what they want to do. So when I build my calendar, one of my jobs, well, my job is to build the monthly calendar of activities and give everyone an opportunity to do something that is going to bring them some sort of joy. And like I said, we're moving away from mass activities like bingo. Everybody loves bingo, and we have a huge attendance for bingo. Attendance doesn't matter anymore in my community. What matters is if the person had a good time, if they were engaged, if they learned something, if they're passionate about it, or if maybe they were able to meet someone new at that activity. So I'm trying to get them out of this mentality. They always ask me, so how many people go to art class? I don't like art class. How many people go to art class? Why isn't it bingo? And I'll say, I'm sorry you don't like art class. We had, 2 or 3 people go to art class and they had a great time at art class because they love art. So just because it's 2 people versus 25 people, I'm not going to cancel art and put bingo because more people go to bingo. What about those 2 people that like art class? I'm not going to cancel it. And then what are they going to do? So I put
Yeah.
little things here and there. So if you like this, you go to this. If you don't like that, don't go to that, go to this. And like, that's kind of going back to like, what are some issues that I have to deal with? That's one of the issues.
That's one of the issues. Hey, where's the
Where they
where's the
all,
more bingo?
they're like, where's bingo?
Can we
Couldn't
do
this
bingo
just be
like 10 more
bingo?
times? Yeah, like couldn't this other thing just be
And I'm
bingo?
like, no, I don't want to do more bingo. I've actually tried to get rid of some bingo very slowly and secretly. And they actually didn't really notice.
Didn't really notice.
So
Okay, you didn't have a revolt, so that's good. But hey,
thank
if you
goodness.
don't want to do more bingo on your Twitch stream, which is Maritza, how come on your birthday you did bingo?
Okay,
I was
so
there. We did bingo.
okay, well, let me tell you a story.
Okay.
In the beginning, when I first started working where I work, we had a resident who made bingo horrible. She was so mean. She didn't want anybody to talk. She wanted me to be on time every time, and she wanted me to just be so like rigid about bingo that she made bingo not fun. And because of her, I didn't want to call bingo. I mean, I had to anyway, but it was just not a fun. Bingo wasn't fun. And in my head, I was like, oh, I thought bingo was supposed to be like a really cool time. Why is this so lame? So,
What happened?
a few months ago, Miss Bingo Lover passed away, and she's playing bingo up in heaven. And now bingo is so fun. So we have such a great time playing bingo now that like I don't get anxious to have to go call bingo because she's not there anymore. So so it's a good time. And so for my birthday, I thought it would be super fun to call bingo in a way that was completely opposite from what I was used to doing in the past. And I had a really fun time calling bingo.
Okay. Well, I'm with you. That's hilarious. No. Okay. Okay. Well, you were talking about how you're trying to move things away a little bit from just this particular mass group activity to some more joyful, engaging, purposeful stuff. And it kind of the purpose thing kind of reminded me of the story, since we're talking about old timey stuff. I've heard this quite a lot in recent days. The story keeps coming up as there was a World War II situation that happened. I think it was England. They had a psychiatric ward where there was a bunch of men who, during the Depression, because it was a Great Depression right before World War II, right? So during the Great Depression, they became completely catatonic. So there was a psychiatric ward where there's just like these guys sitting there completely still. And they were that way for years, several years, not moving, unresponsive to anything. And then there was the German Blitz, right? So there's all these bombs all this, just this devastation and destruction, and there was a lack of people to drive emergency vehicles, essentially. And believe it or not, out of nowhere, a lot of these guys apparently got up, got dressed, and said, I'll drive the trucks. So, like, as soon as there was a purpose for them that they felt was serious enough, like maybe they were laying there just because they didn't feel like there was anything for them. Maybe they'd been out of a job for 10 years. I don't know what happened. It just affected them so badly. But as soon as there was a real life and death kind of reason happening, they just like snapped out of it somehow. So that long story that I've heard, I'm pretty sure I heard Chris Williamson say it on his podcast, and that's probably why I'm saying it now. It made me think of that and this long story to ask the question, what's missing in the elderly care, the sector that you work in? Or is there something that you can think of that's like, we don't have quite enough of this, and I would like to see more of it if possible? Like, what would you change? Is it all of that to say, hey, what would you change, Maritza? Like, that would have been way easier.
What would I change?
But hey, you have to hear me ramble a little bit on my podcast. Like, this is,
of course,
this is classic Rick. Like, I have to be rambling. So
it's okay. I'm used to ramblers. It's fine.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. That's right. Until they pass away, then we're good. Then bingo's fun again. No, so yeah, we're good.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
So what I think what I would think about changing is actually what we're doing now. This push to create engagement versus caring about attendance is something that the company I work for has been working on for a few years. And finally this year, they are actually launching what they call engagement like 3.0 or something, where they're focusing on relationships versus things to do. So they want us to create programs where it brings people together and they can just build friendships, because what's missing from a lot of these people is honestly like human interaction, where if they've their husband or wife passed away and they moved in, they're all alone, maybe their kids are in a different state or they have no kids, what they're missing is human interaction. So what's important, or what I hope that more places like this, more communities, assisted living communities or elder living communities are doing, is creating programs or activities that encourages people to come together and just make friends. And that's one of the concepts of where I work, is friendships first, programs second. That's like the motto, that's our mantra.
That's amazing.
So that helps me create activities where it brings people together. Like one thing I did when I first started working there is I did afternoon tea. So and it was for everybody, not just ladies. But another statistic or another fun fact for you is like the majority of people living in these communities are women. You have a higher proportion of women versus men. So a lot of the activities are kind of gauged more towards women, which is actually an issue for me, because like I don't know what to do for the guys, but it's okay. I'm working on it. But okay. I did afternoon tea, and so I set it up all fancy like a tea party. I didn't call it a tea party though. It was afternoon tea. There's a difference. And I had maybe like 25 ladies and one man. They all came and they sat around the table, and I have so many pictures of them where they're all just like sipping their tea, having their cookies. We had tea sandwiches, and at the end they all clapped and they said, this is the most fun we've ever had. And all of them were all just chit-chatting at the end. I thought it was so funny that they clapped, but I accepted. I was like, oh, thank you. But the important thing is that they were all sitting there and like talking to each other, introducing each other to each other for the first time, even though they've lived there for, who knows how. Oh, what's your name? Oh, nice to meet you. I sit at the dining room. I sit in this table. Like, oh, you like to play bridge? Me too. Like, they were all just talking to each other. And it was really nice that they were, I guess, maybe forcing them to sit in that space together, versus like in the dining room, they all sit in assigned seats. So maybe they were able to mingle with people that they didn't have an opportunity to before, maybe because they were shy or they just didn't really think about it. And so everybody was just meeting each other, and it was so nice that they all just kind of hung out and had a
Wow.
good time.
That's fantastic. And think this is probably good for any age at this point. Like a lot of us, that this has been a thing that people are talking about so often, is that a lot of us aren't getting a lot of social interaction outside of
Hmm.
our home group kind of thing. That does
Yeah.
happen a lot. I think the most interaction I had in recent times was going to TwitchCon, where I did meet you. You were amazing.
Yeah.
But I met a lot of people obviously when I was there, but a lot of times I'm thinking about it. You're making me think right now that I'm like, I better go out there and make some more friends in real life. I spend a lot of time I spend a lot of time here. um
Yeah.
the other thing that I
It's
took
harder,
oh
right? As
yeah,
we get older. Sorry to cut you off, but
no,
like
it is.
as we get older, it's harder to make friends. And I think if you ask anybody who's in their 30s or 40s, if they're not friends with people they met when they were teenagers or in their 20s, maybe they haven't met new friends in like decades. So it is hard to make friends when you get older, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. It is hard. It is a lot harder. I mean, you don't have the kind of time. I guess this is kind of interesting though, because when you're in school, you're pressed into a group of people, and you randomly, like when you're in school, you just put there randomly with a bunch of different people, and the people that you connect with, and they become your friends. Now I feel like, okay, let cut to you're 77 years old. You're hanging out with Maritza in the senior community, and there's a bunch of new people, and you're kind of just there, put in there, and saying, okay, well, here's where I'm at. And you have tea, and now suddenly you've got this group of friends that you gravitated to again. So maybe through through this interaction, it's going to happen again. And maybe just because we don't put ourselves in those situations during our 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe 60s as well, that's the
Hmm.
problem. Oh, that's really cool. And I guess there must be some reasons, like there's some where there's probably a lot of studies that are saying like older people who have relationships and purpose and that kind of stuff probably live longer or live more joyful or satisfactory lives. Is that sort of the reason you guys are changing that thing?
Yeah. For
Okay.
sure. We do a survey every year where one of the questions on the survey for the residents is, are do you feel how often do you feel lonely or do you feel depressed? And I think that more people than not are putting, I'm always sad or I'm always lonely or I'm very depressed. And that's one of the reasons why we're changing the focus of attendance to engagement and building friendships first. Because people like loneliness is a killer. Like stress will kill you, and so will loneliness.
Wow.
Like you said, I'm sure there's studies who out there that show you the data. And I don't know if you've heard, but like if you have like a couple who's been together for 70 years, one of them passes away, the other person passes away soon after, and it's like, is it a coincidence or is there something to it, you know? And that, I think that's one of the reasons why that there are more women than men in communities like this, is because women are stronger. I think they can deal with their spouse passing away
You're
better
like,
than
well,
men
it was
because
nice. It was nice while it lasted. It was good while it lasted.
but that's not always the case, and everybody's different. But loneliness is a reason why people will feel like they just don't want to live anymore,
Hmm.
unfortunately, and we don't want them to feel that way. Or if we can help alleviate the sadness or the loneliness, and then that's what we're trying to do in the assisted living community for sure.
You know, I do feel that, like, I think about that sometimes, and I'm like, man, if my if the person that I'm with, if my wife wasn't here, I don't like, what would be the point? And it I do think that way fairly often. So I could see from an older guy's perspective, if he was in that situation, it would probably be pretty tough. I think probably, I'm not saying women don't think that way, but I don't know. There is something that men are like, my purpose is to be with this person and do my best for
Hmm.
them and that kind of stuff a lot of times. And so that completely wipes out what your purpose is. So it's got to be, it does sound like a kind of a difficult issue as far as the guys go. Oh,
Hmm.
okay. I have I have a question. I know everybody wants to know this question. I got to ask it.
Mm.
So it is what it is.
Yes.
Okay. you were talking about how there's a pretty big ratio of women to men, but there are some men.
Hmm.
It's just seemed that way. So is sexuality a thing? What's going on? What's going on with that? We want to know.
Like,
What
can you
are
be more specific?
how specific do I gotta be? Okay, so you're putting me down.
Like, are
Okay,
people getting freaky
are
or?
I mean, is it possible? Are people getting freaky? Is there like what's the sexuality situation? You said it's like high school. Is it exactly
Mhm.
like high school, or what are the differences here? What's going on? Hey,
So,
these are the hard hitting questions that we have to ask.
so the answer is yes.
Woohoo!
As
Yes.
far as like, can they do it? I don't know exactly the mechanics, but people do get together in places like that. And actually, we've had two people or two, three. We have three couples that coupled up living there and I think that's actually something that's really good for them because it gives them a partner to be with and look forward to seeing, and it makes them happy overall. So we are all for it. We're
Yeah.
like, yes, if you can find a partner, that is awesome. And we've had people who meet each other and we've had three couples couple up where I work, and it's like really fun to watch like their little love story unfold. The We haven't had to deal with a breakup yet,
Oh.
so hopefully we don't. But they're all the couples are so much happier being together than they were being alone. And I think for at least for two of those instances, it was the lady that went and kind of like pursued the guy, and then one was the guy went after the girl. But um yeah, so yes, people in and depending obviously on your physical ability, you can definitely do what you want to do. But at least in terms of partnership, we really like that they are together as a couple just to have companionship and
And
just give you some joy in your life.
you're right about that. We talked about this right at the beginning that people are people. So I know this is a dumb question, of course, but at the same time, I wanted to ask because it sounds like okay, not just sexuality, but there's romance, right? That's romance to
Hmm.
some degree. That's partnership. That's company, and that's something kind of different and something new that happened that you maybe didn't expect at the
Hmm.
end at this stage in life. I keep saying at the end of your life. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but but yeah, nearer to the
But
end.
you have a point though, because when you think of, oh, like I'm 80 years old, this is it. But then all of a sudden, here comes like, Betty, and you're like, wow, she's so beautiful, and all of a sudden it kind of like breathes new life into your existence, and it's not the end, maybe, well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no,
Some people can think that it is, but maybe they hear something new and exciting that's gonna revitalize your life a little bit, and why not, just do
no,
it,
that
just go for it.
absolutely not. That makes so much sense. And it's so nice, and I love the term "Here comes Betty."
Yeah.
So,
Here comes Betty.
and here comes Betty. You thought it was over. Here comes Betty.
And then a Betty walks into your life.
Here we go. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I have there's this one quote that I was reading that I thought was interesting. It says, "Respect the elderly when you're young, help the weak when you're strong, confess the fault when you are wrong, because one day in life you will be old, weak, and wrong." So I kind of thought that somebody who does the work that you do, I mean, it sounds like you take a lot of fulfillment out of it. I'm not saying that it's like, oh no, it's some impossible job that you don't want to have to do, but you do it. That's not what's going on. You did pick something that you're getting a lot of satisfaction out of, but still can be challenging and is something a large portion of the population I think doesn't pay as that much attention to or doesn't know
Mhm.
very much about. Not that it's not that we hate it or something, but doesn't pay that much attention to. But yet it's every single it's a possible destination for every single one of us. And you're out
Mhm.
there trying to make people's lives more enriched at the very end is something very beautiful about that. So I wanted to say thank you to you for being a part of that and for
Well,
educating
thank
me a
you.
little bit on this. It means a lot
Of
to me.
course.
So
Oh, well, thank you very much.
and thank you for coming on. But I'll say this: was there something that I didn't say or that I didn't ask you that you wanted to say about this, or like any kind of story or anything you wanted to talk about? If we missed something, if not, that's fine. But if so, please say so.
Well, I guess if I could say one thing about what I do, or just like old people in general, is like listen to your grandparents and listen to their stories. Or if you hear someone who's rambling about something, like just ask them, like listen and engage to what they're telling you, because you don't know what you're gonna learn. And spending time with the elderly, like you learn a lot of things, and they've lived through so much. I feel like a lot of times because they're older, they're old people, we don't care about them or we don't want to think about it. But put yourself in their shoes when you're 80 years old and there's some young person there and you're trying to tell them something and they just ignore you. Like it's gonna make you feel so bad. So, maybe just take a moment and sit there and listen, and you might learn something new or something cool. Like I did that today. Have you ever heard of a party line?
No, I don't know. I have no
And
idea
not
what is that.
I'm not talking about that kind of party line.
I thought it was like a 900 number from the 90s or something where it's like, whoa, we're all here at this party. Call us up, and it costs a bunch of money or something.
That's what I thought. Today we were doing like trivia or like some word game. And one of the answers was party line. And they're like, "Oh yeah, party line." And I said, "What is a party line?" And one of the residents who used to be a phone operator told me that back when she lived on the farm, her and her 8 neighbors had a party line. And I'm still not 100% sure how it works, but she said that basically back then there were no phone numbers. You had to listen to the click on the phone. So for example, her phone number was 14, so it would be like a long click and then 4 little clicks. And so you had to hear for the clicks on the phone, and you knew that the phone call was for you, and then you could answer the phone. But because it was a party line, everybody could pick up the phone and listen to your conversation. So I was like, what? Oh, and
Ah,
then get this. So she was a phone operator and she used to work on pay phones. So back in the day, before the technology was advanced, I'm assuming, the phone operator could tell the amount of money you put into the payphone by the sound that it made when you put the money into the payphone. So she had to listen and make sure, because the sound for like a penny, a dime, a nickel, a quarter was all different. She had to listen that you put in the correct amount of money to be able to connect your call to whoever you wanted to call. Isn't
this is incredible.
that crazy?
That's so crazy. Incredible stories. I mean, and we lose all that stuff. We will forget what's what if we don't listen.
Right?
Oh,
It was so interesting. So I'm just like Google party line and phone operators, or go watch a documentary or something, because that's so interesting. I had no idea. I had no
wow.
idea.
I mean, you must have a million examples of this kind of thing somewhere, like
Yeah.
just squirreled away. That's
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
I
There's
I
so many cool stories.
I always thought the party line, like when I think of not just the phone version, but it's like a political party's narrative. You say like, oh, that's the party
Mm,
line. But I wonder if it
yeah.
has some relation to this party line. Like that's what everybody's saying
Maybe.
when we listen on their phone calls.
Oh
Is it
yeah.
possible?
You're probably right. Yeah.
I'd like to be. Let's say that I am right. Just
You're
because.
right. You're right. Actually,
Oh,
you figured it out.
great. That's amazing how I figured that out. So cool. Wow. Okay. You know what? It's been some time. I appreciate your time, and I know you probably want to eat something or something like that. I know you've been busy
It's
today.
dinner time.
But no, I mean, like, you were busy today. You took the time. It's you didn't have a day off like you were hoping, and you still took the time to talk to me. So it really means a lot to me. Totally appreciate it, and just thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I want everyone to follow you. So obviously, I'm going to put all your links in the descriptions. But if they want to follow you, it's Mar Pizza, like generally at Mar Pizza,
Yeah.
Marpizza. Twitch,
Mhm.
on Instagram as well. I think it's about the same. I'll put all those links too. I
Yeah,
assume
it's the same everywhere.
it's the same
But
everywhere.
thank
Mar Pizza.
you so much for having me. It's always awesome talking to you. You always have the best questions,
Oh,
and you can gab and I can gab. We can go for hours.